Okay, I've heard Morris Day's version of this story about you being fired by Prince, um, and which I gotta be honest, if that was on my tombstone, I'd be okay with that. Like Prince must fire me, right? I'd be excited about that. So, and this is back when you guys were working with the time and everything. So, I have to know, how does Prince fire somebody? What did he say to you? How much of that conversation do you remember?
Well, I
I
think
remember.
every word, right, Jam?
Yeah, I remember it all. And actually, the part I remember, because you actually stayed in the room longer than me, and I'll set it up a little bit, was we had gone down to Atlanta to produce the SOS band, and we got caught in a snowstorm down there, and couldn't catch our flight out to make the Time concert, which was in San Antonio, Texas.
And of
So
course,
we
you have to
missed.
say what song it is you were doing for the SOS band, which is
Okay,
a classic.
yeah, it turned out to be a classic. But wait, don't put the end at the
Okay,
beginning.
okay, my bad.
So,
Let
so,
me let you tell your story.
so, so anyway, um, that night we're supposed to go mix that song, right? And we had recording time set up to mix. And Prince calls and he says, "Meet me at Sunset Sound at 6 o'clock or whatever." And Terry and I looked at each other and we said, "Okay, wait, should we go mix the SOS band song or should we go meet Prince?" Well, obviously we're going to go meet Prince. That was our gig, right? So we show up at Sunset Sound and the accountant is there. And so we go, "Uh-oh, he must be going to fire us because, the accountant's going to give us our last check or whatever." But the accountant just walks by and he goes, "Oh, you guys have a good session." And we're like, "Okay." We walk into this little room. It's me, Terry, Morris, Jesse, and Prince. And Prince just says, "I told you guys not to produce other records on other bands." And we said, "Yeah." And he said, "You produce the SOS band?" And we said, "Yeah." And he said, "So you're fired." And I was like, "Okay." And I got up and walked out the room. so so Terry stuck around a little farther in the room, and then Terry, you can tell whatever happened when I left.
Oh yeah, well, right, picking up where you left off, we had a short conversation where I tried to reason with him, like, why let us go now? This doesn't make any sense. All we're trying to do is better ourselves and learn more and have an outlet for our creativity. And he said, "You guys are fired." And then, Morris got up and walked out. And then so did I. So we went outside and we said, "Okay, so what are we going to do now?" We said, "Go mix." So we went to the studio and we was our first meeting with the engineer there who we had hired. His name was Steve Hodge. And Steve Hodge said, "What's wrong with you guys? We just got fired from the Time." He said, "Well, I wouldn't worry about that because you guys have a smash here." And he pushed play and on came "Just Be Good to Me." And all we could do was dance around. Now we still had long faces for a minute, but we were dancing hard because it sounded so good. But it was definitely fate. So I've assembled over the years a different terminology for what Prince did for us. And God bless you, Prince, and rest in peace, brother, because we love you. But Prince did not fire us. He freed us to pursue our destiny. And, we appreciate all that he did for us. And sometimes, being the boss, as we've learned over the years, you have to make hard decisions. So that was his decision. Now, as Jimmy calls it, the epilogue, a couple weeks later, he called and tried to get me to come back without Jimmy because his idea was to divide and conquer. So
Wow,
I
that's
said,
ruthless.
yeah, well, yeah, it's business. I get it. But I declined his invitation and the rest is history. So we just moved forward from there.
By the way, let
Well,
me just tell you. Let me just tell you though, by Terry declining his invitation, I remember it more like, "You tell that little," like it was like if the phone was almost disintegrating in his hand. This was before cell phones, right? So this is the big full size phone, and Terry's got this thing in his hand, and he's like, and I'm like, "Oh no, T, it's cool, man. Go ahead and it's all good." He says, "You tell that little," because Jelly Bean Johnson called him, the drummer called him from the time. And he'd known Terry longer than even me. And he was like, no, Terry wasn't going for it. So that we were solidified. We were always solidified anyway, but that totally solidified it at that point. Like, no, there's no divide and conquer. We're moving forward with what we're doing. And of course, when Just Be Good to Me came a #1 record, then he tried to get us back. The epilogue is he tried to get us back. And
both of you guys this time, or?
Yeah, I don't know whether I don't know. Yeah, I think probably at that point. Well, the thing was, we were never really fired. It was a bluff. And we realized that when we went to the accountant to get our check. We thought we were getting our last check. And we walked into the accountant and they said, hey guys, they gave us our checks. And they said, see you next week. And we were like, okay. The next week we went back, and the next week we went back. And after about 3 weeks, we finally went back, and they said, there was a guy named Lee Bailey. He had a show called Radio Scope, right? It was a syndicated radio show. And he had cornered us at a concert we were at and said, I heard you guys were fired from the Time. And we were like, what are you talking about, man? We don't know what you're talking about. So anyway, we go back to the accountant and they go, oh, hey guys, we can't give you your checks this week. And we said, why not? And they said, well, we heard you're fired. And we laughed. We said, we got fired a month ago. Where'd you hear we got fired? Oh, it was just on the radio, Lee Bailey, Radio Scope. So at that point, that's when the bluff was up. And it was like a bluff. It was like kind of like, I'm going to fire them and scare them and see how they do. But at that point, the wheels were already rolling because the record was coming out and everybody said it's going to be a smash. And it was. So that was the end of that.
So it's something that I often talk to young people about when I tell them just as important as the open window is the closed door, right? Is that because sometimes an opportunity you don't get could be the one that changes the whole game for you. And you guys, that's such a great example of that. But I'm curious, the next time that you ran into Prince face to face, what was that meeting like?
No, it was fun. I think the next time I saw him, it was all fun and games, basically, because we were doing fine. But it turned out, I think, was after was Purple Rain tour.
Purple Rain tour. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we saw him in Detroit, as a matter of fact.
Yep.
And that, I had no ill feeling at that point, but the way he treated, more specifically Jimmy, because he had like a silent rivalry with Jimmy for some reason. He wasn't treating Jimmy right. And that was the day that I disowned him for about 2 or 3 years. He was banned at my house. Like, you couldn't even say his name or play. His music was banned. His likeness was banned because I just cut it off. It's like, no, you can't do my man like that and then expect me to be okay with that. That's not cool.
I remember.
What was this rivalry about, Jimmy, you and Prince? Where did that come from?
You know what? I don't really know. I met Prince when I was probably 12 years old. I want to say 13 years old, something like that. We were in junior high together and took a keyboard class together. And I was always impressed with his, musicianship. And I think he was very impressed with my musicianship because I played drums and keyboard. He played drums and keyboard and guitar. Like he played a lot of stuff. So I think it was maybe that. Also, we're Geminis and our birthdays are a day apart. I'm the 6th, he's the 7th. But I don't really know because I was always like his biggest fan. Like I actually auditioned for his band and I didn't get the gig, which was perfectly fine because Matt Fink got it and Matt was much better than me anyway. But I don't really know exactly what it was. But I never felt anything like that towards him. And he made me better. Like the thing that Prince taught me more than anything was work ethic, because I remember back in the Time days, we used to go to rehearsals and we would rehearse for, 6 hours, but he'd rehearse us. He'd be there at the rehearsal, like running us through stuff. And then he'd go rehearse his band, The Revolution, for 6 hours. And then he'd go to the studio all night. And then he'd come back the next day and he'd put a tape in. It would be like 1999 or something, or Lady Cab Driver or something. Or it would be like, when'd you do that? He'd go, I did this last night. It's like, when do you sleep? Like
right. After he went to the club.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, it was crazy. But that taught us about work ethic. And it's like, once again, I always use athletes as the analogy. It's like, people like Michael Jordan, who talent-wise are already just the best. But then they take that talent and they work like somebody who's a scrub. And when you combine that, and when the most talented man on the team is also the hardest working man on the team, first in the gym, first out of the gym, setting his house up. I remember going to his house in Chicago. He set up this whole weight room and would have, you know, Ron Harper and Scottie Pippen and all those guys would come over to work out with him, right? It's like when you have that as an example, that's what it was. That's what Prince was to me. Like he was the hardest working guy, but he was taking care of everybody. So it made me motivated to try to really do my best at everything I did.